All right, hey class. Sorry this video is going up a week late, but I do have a few things that I want to walk you through today just to help you guys get comfortable for kind of wrapping up Project 2 and continuing to do your kind of research and analysis. So if you remember on Monday, what we were talking about was we were discussing the purpose of doing genre analysis. And what we said was by pulling apart the components of a genre or doing this kind of work, what we can do is we can then make some assumptions about the communities that produce that genre. So for example, if we pulled apart the patient history form and we looked at what was on there and what was being asked, we could guess at what the goals of the community using that form might be, right? In this case, health and to provide health services and things like that. And so by doing this for your community, you can do the same thing. You can learn about their values, about the things that are important to them. And so that's why we're doing this. Now, I want to walk you through what's going on for this week, because as you know, you have your rough draft due. And again, this does not have to be a complete draft, but just kind of a work in progress. Don't feel like you have to have every section done, but get done what you can. You also have a quiz due that just goes over the reading that we've been reviewing. So make sure you get that done on time. Okay, so what I want to do then is I want to talk a little bit more in depth about Project 2, then I'll talk about the rough drafts. And so what I've done is I've put up here under the Week 5 activities this Project 2 outline. Now, this is the same outline that we talked about in class, and so I'll pull it up here so we can take a look. All right, so here we go. So this is a sample for how Project 2 should be put together. And so you have your introduction that you should have already been working on in class on Monday, where you're introducing your general topic, of genre analysis. You're introducing the context, which means, both your discourse community as well as, the articles and the authors that you're working with. Then your objectives. And so by this, I mean, like, what are you going to do in this essay? How are you going to tackle this topic? And then your thesis. So in other words, what does this analysis do for your understanding of your community? So something you might do is something along the lines of this is a genre analysis of these specific articles. By pulling them apart in these particular ways, I can learn more about, what their values are, things like that. So now if we move down, we can see that the essay is broken into 3 sections, just like it is on the prompt. So the introduction section, all we're doing is pulling the major components out of both articles. Article 1, the major components with specific examples. Article 2, same thing. Now, I do want to stress to remember that one of these articles is one that's written by a member of your community. The other is one that I have assigned for class. Okay, so then once we have those major components, we can come down here to this analysis section. And you're just using those components to talk about what they indicate about the community. And so you're going to pull, maybe the citation styles from both articles, talk about, whether or not they're similar or whether they're different, and then tell me why you think that might be or what those similarities or differences tell you about those communities. And then coming down to the reflection, this is just kind of your moment to think about what you've learned so far. So what did you learn by doing this? How do genres help shape the communities they belong to? So in other words, if the community is using these various tools to do their work, how are those tools, interacting with or affecting or helping to shape the goals of that community? And on the flip side, how are genres shaped by the community? So, how do genres get transformed by the community? Like, lots of people use, the same basic tools, but they take on kind of a specific role based on what community they're in. So just kind of think about those things generally. Now, as I said in class, a lot of students have problems when it comes to actually doing analysis, and because it can be kind of a hard thing to do. And so what I've done here is I've just outlined an analytical paragraph. And so what this is this represents the basic moves you should be making in a paragraph in order to do a really concrete analysis. And so you'll notice it has kind of 4 key steps. The first one is the topic sentence, in which you are connecting this current paragraph to the paragraph that came before, while also introducing your main topic for this paragraph. And so if you remember, I talked in class about how to do this effectively. The thing you want to do is you want to look for that common denominator. So in other words, what is the relationship between the paragraph you're about to write and the paragraph that you just wrote? You're putting them next to each other for a reason, and so just make that reason clear. whether it's a continuation of an idea or a related idea, or maybe it's, kind of an alternative or something like that. There's some sort of relationship there. Otherwise, those two paragraphs would not be in the same essay. So just make that relationship clear. So once you've got your topic sentence, you're going to want to introduce your analytical claim. So this is where you start to kind of put in your observation or your argument or whatever kind of strong statement that you're going to be using evidence to support. And so in this case, you might say something like Article 1 uses really strong really short sentence structure in order to communicate its points, right? So there's an observation. And then what you would do is you would come into number 3 down here, and you would give me some evidence for that. You'd give me an example of that short sentence. And then number 4 is where you'd come in and say, where you start to kind of explain what that means. Now, a lot of this stuff will take place, obviously, in that analysis section. So don't worry about doing too much of this in your introduction. Introduction, that should be identification section. I realize. Sorry about that. All right, so that's your basic breakdown. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about in here today is I've got your peer review group discussion board up. You can see rough 2 drafts. So go ahead and make sure that you are uploading your drafts as soon as possible, starting Friday, and that you're commenting on each other's drafts. Now, I've had some concerned students talking about how they're not getting any feedback sometimes or whatever. So I just want to remind you that these things are with points, that I am checking these quite often. So make sure that you are coming in and doing these, or else you are going to lose out on those points, and it will affect your overall grade. So be sure that you're on top of those things. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Email me if you have any questions or concerns, and have a good weekend.